All right, good morning, everyone. We are so excited to bring Dana Litwin in with us today to talk about volunteer engagement and how important that is right now. All the special considerations that we have to make now, but also all the opportunities that exist right now. Welcome to all of you in the chat. Please continue to put introductions to who you are, where you're from, your role in your organization, any questions you have. Let's keep that live and active, and we'll share that with folks. Before I introduce Dana and have her share a bit about her work, I just want to share a little bit about myself. I'm Heather Hiscox from Pause for Change. And what we do is we work with nonprofit, local government, and philanthropic organizations to help them change the way that they change the world. It's really about helping them be most efficient and effective in how they address big, hairy problems or pursue really exciting opportunities. So we go in and work with teams to help them learn a whole new way to work and either launch an idea quickly or save some resources, putting it slowly to sleep if it needs to go. So I'm so excited to have Dana here today. Dana, I felt like I won the lottery. We were at the Southern Arizona Volunteer Management Association awards breakfast, and I was a judge reading like 37 applications for folks that were going to receive honors for their amazing volunteer service. And I just sat at the table they told me to sit at, and Dana just happened to be next to me. And we're just talking, and next thing I know, she's the keynote speaker and gets up to go to the stage. And I thought, wow, look at that. What are the odds? And we just love chatting. We've been chatting ever since. We joked that we would like to have a separate show of just Dana and I talking about all the weird stuff that we like to really talk about. But we're happy to have her today to share about everything volunteerism. She's literally like one of the leading experts that knows all the ins and outs. And so I'm so excited to have her here today. So Dana, let's take it away, and please tell us a little bit about your background and the work that you do.
Yeah, well, you see the bio there. I know a lot of you before. I know some really well, like Karita, working together in Alive and my years on the board there. And as I mentioned, with my weird weather pattern, that's probably different from almost anywhere else you are today. I'm in San Francisco where it's foggy and windy and a little bit cold per our summer season. And yeah, I've really been got into volunteer engagement kind of sideways, like most of us do, in around 2002, and just really loved it. So most of what I've done has been working with government agencies and nonprofits that are in animal or land conservation. I've done some stints with um, kids programs, after school programs, and some food security agencies as well. And in consulting for the last several years and doing a lot of speaking and teaching, I'm doing certain things, on a national level as much as I can, kind of for our profession, not just with my years on the board of Alive, but with the new kind of cross-sector organization, National Alliance for Volunteer Engagement. And again, just with clients and pro bono work since COVID struck, a lot of talks like these, like, how do we cope and how do we get through these absolutely unique times and crisis and difficulties that we're in. There's definitely some silver linings that are coming out of response to the pandemic and social changes and things that are happening. And one of the reasons that I connect so well with Heather, and I love talking to her, we love working together on projects, is this idea that out of a challenge comes the possibility for change that wasn't previously thought about or thought possible. So now we know that a lot of things like people working remotely more are possible. And that has not just an effect on a work-life balance, not always good or bad, but it has an effect on, the passion that I also have of environmentalism and conservation and kind of lowering our carbon footprint. So we're learning in the last several months we're getting pushed to extremes, but we're also learning new coping mechanisms. That's part of what I wanted to answer questions around today, are some really boots on the ground practical steps of how to do stuff, and then a couple of bigger ideas of let's start to think about things in a really different way and shift our own mindset, and then tell that story back at our agencies and to our whole team of paid and unpaid people that we work with, and really, how much can we change and create a new reality going forward that it works more works better for more people than the way we've been working has in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the reasons why I said, Dana, I really need you to come talk to folks is that Dana's seeing a lot of bad decision making happening right now regarding volunteer engagement and management and volunteer programs. And talking to her was so eye-opening to me, saying, oh my gosh, like that does sound like the bad course of action to take, or that does
Hmm.
sound like it's going to have negative impacts. So we wanted to start with some of that because you might be feeling some of that pain and having some of those changes within your own organization. So Dana, I want you to talk a little bit about what you and I have discussed of what are some of the decisions that organizations are making right now that really make you concerned?
Well, what's already occurred that we hope to can kind of stop this and apply a tourniquet of correct information. And I know some people on this call have been in the situation where when panic struck and we all, as a sector, started to realize that, oh, we really need to drastically alter how we're interacting with each other for virus safety and health safety. Unfortunately, before Alive could intervene, or American Service Commissions, or even National Alliance could get communication out to CEOs and executive directors, there was such a panic and a sense of scarcity and a sense of how will we even do our mission that 93%, this is a real statistic that Volunteer Match and a few others, including some other consultant agencies, did various surveys. What we've realized is 93% of the sector just went and panicked and stopped. And that includes furloughing volunteer leading staff, that includes completely stopping programs without communicating with volunteers or the staff programs. So one of the core mistakes that we're trying to stop from continuing or mitigate the damage of is when someone, you know, further up the decision making tree in an agency, like a board or an executive director or president or CEO, decides without the input of their leaders of volunteers in their staff, or if it's even a volunteer run organization, there's some sort of unilateral decision to stop or pause or drastically change what's happening with the volunteer talent pool with that part of the team. And I've seen horrendous cases where there's no communication with the employees running those programs, and there's no communication with the volunteers themselves. There's just stop. And what that has done, and people on this call feel free to try and, is that absolutely shatters trust. And trust is essential between all team members, paid and unpaid, and also trust in the leadership and the decision making and the judgment of who is running, who are the deciders in that agency, or government agency, nonprofit agency, corporate employee program. That absolutely shatters the relationships that have taken years and years and years to build up trust. And when you lose trust, people lose a connection to the agency. So it's even more important, it's beyond the word engagement. Like, oh, we want to engage. Community engagement, volunteer engagement can mean a lot of things. But it's really about leaders not trusting their own experts on their teams, their own, paid or unpaid leaders of volunteers, to have them at the table and help make those decisions. So some of that damage has already been done, and we're doing our best, pardon me, frog in my throat, to care for our colleagues who are in that situation, who are furloughed or laid off or just paused, not knowing, do they come back to a job, or what does it look like to come back to a job? Or what's most often the case, I've had a lot of side conversations with friends and colleagues who, they were so blindsided by the decision and the lack of communication that all of their volunteers, they're kind of stuck in the middle now, because they want to keep their job with that agency if they can and come back and have a living and have money. Um, but the volunteers are hurt and gone. And so how do you repair that trust, as sometimes a department of one or the rest of your staff, not being respected enough by leaders of these organizations or understood um, as the experts that they are in, and that's caused a huge amount of trauma and trouble in the sector, in that 93% where that is occurring.
It's so hard. And it is part of that reaction, right? We
Yeah.
had to react, we
Knee,
had
knee,
to
it was knee jerk,
respond.
it was panic. It's very
Yeah.
short, it's very harmful short-term thinking. So what's occurred to
Mhm.
solve for that is um, Alive is doing some work to communicate with leaders of organizations. America's Service Commission is actually getting some legislation through to fund things at a national level, so programs can, similar to AmeriCorps, can be more robust and start up again. And National Alliance for Volunteer Engagement is doing kind of high level, behind the scenes, cross sector talks with funders and HR and other associations and organizations outside of the volunteer sector to help kind of gather the troops and create that critical mass of understanding. It's so important to include volunteerism and leaders of volunteers in your core strategies and in your decision making for long-term success through this crisis, especially, or any crisis. The other side of it is that 7% that is not immediately shut down is taking on almost the rest of the work from the 93% and are really overwhelmed and having to adapt to trying to move roles online, trying to move communication to internet things, and if they can adapt, if there's something like a food bank or an elder respite, home care service or food delivery, that suddenly not being able to or having to drastically adapt to how you do things in person has also had a huge traumatic impact on the connection between the agency's missions and how they're able to do the work out in the field. Anyway, let's
So
start with some bad news. That's how I like to kick off a meeting, is bringing everybody down, starting you out.
I think it's so important. I think some of you, and I want to hear in the chat, like, have you seen this in your agencies? Like, please put that in the chat. Have you seen the panic? Have you seen the people freezing? Have you seen the voice of volunteer managers kind of left in the dust? Put that in the chat because I want to see if you're experiencing that. The other piece that I want Dana to talk about, because she is really closely connected to so many organizations, is what are you seeing that's really new and like what we get excited about? What are the possibilities? What's the cool, innovative stuff that you're seeing that people are doing with rebuilding the trust, rebuilding the connection with their volunteers, increasing the power of their volunteer managers? Like, give us some inspiring and happy stories.
Here's the other side of the coin.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so when, in the cases where organizations have their volunteer administrator, leader of the programs, yeah, on the leadership team or in the conversations, uh, that's that's where those organizations have succeeded. And the other big thing that I'm seeing that is really inspirational is that for years, particularly in philanthropy, but also in partnerships, there's been this sense of this is our territory, or don't poach our clients or our volunteers from us, or we cover this area of this part of San Francisco or Oakland, and you can't have it. And there's been this weird competition, but and usually the leaders of volunteers have said, no, we need to cooperate. We need to combine programs to, enhance our missions and enhance our capacity. We need to partner more. We now have grant makers in philanthropy foundations and organizations just opening up the spigot, and the ones that aren't are getting publicly shamed by Vu Lee on Twitter, which I love. So kind of some
Mhm.
of these barriers to partnerships, to not earmarked funding that can go into the general fund or that can go specifically for volunteer engagement and building capacity of volunteer programs. When that's occurring, those are the people that are thriving. Those are the organizations that are held up as a national model. And one of those is a great example is here in San Francisco, where Shanti, which is already does amazing work for homebound, critically ill, respite. They partner with Project Open Hand and other meal services. They already have a lot of amazing programs. They finally got a partnership with the city of San Francisco, which is notoriously stubborn and weird about stuff, and I can say that because I live here. We're a really weird municipality for our politics and attitudes. We're not quite as progressive and open as people think. So there's this wonderful, finally, after years of hoping for it, partnership between Shanti and city neighborhood food distribution programs that is catching in a safety net, thousands and thousands of people who are suddenly needing these services. So there's usually this population who are food insecure, um, need health and wellness safety checks, need help getting groceries, need help running errands, all that stuff. And now, with so many people laid off or sick themselves or taking care of sick family members, probably 10 times as many people as usual suddenly need these services. So seeing these innovative partnerships or things that it felt like, oh, we couldn't possibly partner with the city. They're such a pain. It's like, no, it's working and it's good. And these should be the things that remain through this crisis and beyond and serve as a model of how to get stuff done, how to work together and cooperate instead of this weird sense of isolation or competition.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Reed
I
Park
want to
Zoo.
look at
Hi,
some of
Carrie.
the stuff in the chat. Dan makes a good point that the virtual stuff is a steep
Hmm.
climb for many orgs that use retired volunteers. So that would be good to chat about. Annette's talking about nobarriersusa.org, how they've launched a virtual program.
Hmm.
At Reed Park Zoo, your volunteer program has continued to function. You started virtually 2 days after the zoo was closed. That's great.
That's really good. San Francisco and Oakland zoos did not do that, I can assure you. It's
Oh,
been tough. They're
interesting.
really struggling. Yeah.
Do you want to tackle Diane's question now, or do you want to wait till later? I think that's an interesting one about what about older volunteers, either
Hmm.
with COVID risk, with using technology. What have you seen? What have you been hearing? What suggestions do you have?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I've had a lot of conversations on this exact subject because not just RSVP as a national seniors helping seniors program, but just in general. One, we shouldn't necessarily make the assumption or generalization that um, boomers or older volunteers can't use technology. Sometimes they can and sometimes they can't. But we want to acknowledge that there's a digital divide of access to computers, access to internet, especially outside of major urban areas. There just may not be the infrastructure of cell data towers or internet in more rural areas or even suburban areas. And so it's really about addressing that core digital divide. And it can tend to be older people or people who are a little more technophobic or not as comfortable with technology. And in that case, you really have to balance what you're shifting to in high tech and your own growing pains around that, and still making sure that you're maintaining a high touch relationship. So letters, cards, phone calls, finding ways to, even if it has to be done remotely, still keeping people who don't have strong internet connection or comfort with using computers or these digital tools, making sure that they still feel involved and that something is happening. And there's a lot of remote work that can be done without having to do online things. Most people have a phone, so if you can at least call a landline if they don't have a cell phone, and have phone trees, kind of team phone trees and check-ins is one way to do that. And wherever it is possible, either there's not a lot of other people in the office, if an office or a site can be open, and masks, personal protective equipment or gloves or hand sanitizer is provided, then there still could be a physical role for people to have if they feel safe. This also is a great time, and I've said this on my Tuesday tips on my YouTube channel, to practice grace and compassion and patience. And I actually want to go to um, a little bit of a slide. So if I can screen share for a minute, can you
Yes.
hand that over to me, or
Yep,
am
yep,
I
you
doing it
can go
myself?
ahead. Yep, go
Okay,
ahead.
uno momento. Let me just get into a screen share. This might look a little bit familiar of a slide if you were with me in a live, but these are just kind of some core things to think about. So compassion and grace, and allowing people to not show up, not just because there might have been poor communication from the top down at the beginning of this, but if they are worried about their health at any age, or they're taking care of family members now because people aren't in offices and or kids aren't in school. So there's so much going on in addition to a pandemic. We've drastically changed how we do work and how we do life with schools shut down and offices shut down, that this is a time to understand if you didn't have a policy before of allowing people, an unlimited leave of absence, or have plans or a deeper bench to fill those spots of their roles, if they can't do it anymore, this is the time to get those plans in action and to just allow people to step back from whatever they need to and attend to the new priorities in their lives and not give them any grief or gruff about it. Just, yep, you get to do whatever you need to do for as long as you need to do it. Um, Here are some ways that you can still uh, support us, in a volunteer capacity remotely. One of the interesting things that I've seen come up is, particularly for older generations who are really great at sewing, is making masks, making fabric masks. That's an incredibly helpful thing, whether it's for your organization or encouraging people to, like, you know what, we don't have a role just yet. Your health is important to us. We want you to take care of yourself. However, what we're seeing is needed in the community is making masks. So if you have a sewing machine and that's a skill you have, um, help the community in another way, even if it's not directly with our program, and just allowing people that flexibility to do that. And these other kind of ways of either continuing your programs through the pandemic or coming back to them. I like to do systems based on the letter C, like the three C's of happy volunteers: comfort, convenience, connection. And here's a bonus C that I've been talking about for the last couple of months, of coping with COVID. So again, whether or not it's already happened, if there's already been some bad communication that's damaged those relationships, do your best to get your leadership on board and have really clear and honest and transparent communication from now on. And to a certain degree, ask the volunteers themselves, like, what are you comfortable doing? What do you want to do? There's probably some amazing ideas of special projects or remote projects or other ways that people can support your mission that are absolutely different from the current roles that have been locked in for years and years and years. So take input and ideas from your talent pool. They know what they can do. There might be people who can translate things into languages and expand the types of volunteers or reach deeper into communities that you haven't been able to reach before. You could have people do special projects on gamification. I've talked about that recently, and kind of having, fun remote competitions. And again, it doesn't have to be online. It can be something if someone just has a phone, or they're doing things by letters or cards, or poster board, or checking in on sites, things like that. But you want to have community input, and the reason there's an asterisk there is not to the point that goes against science and common medical sense. So it's not political, doesn't have to be political choice of an agency to say, for health and safety reasons, if we're interacting with clients, uh, please wear a mask, and we have hand sanitizer, or we're providing the masks, or you need to bring it yourself. As long as the volunteers or all of your team members really know what's expected of them, we want to set and meet the expectations as we lay out how we're doing in-person work again, how we're coming back to that, and assure people that we're thinking about their comfort and their health and their safety going forward. So community input, but not to the point that if someone says, I refuse to wear a mask, but I want to come to the food bank, it's like, well, if you, again, that compassion and grace, okay, if for whatever reason you don't want to wear a mask, these are these other things you can do for us that still support us. But if someone is, jerk is not a protected class. I've also talked about that in other workshops. But if someone's being confrontational jerk about it, let them go. You don't need that person around. This isn't a time for extra stress, and for people who can't or won't go along with what's best and safest for the rest of the team and the mission that you're doing. If someone doesn't have empathy to that degree, they're probably not going to be a great person to work with in your program going forward. So community input, feedback, ways people can support. Um, and there's also sometimes absolutely medical reasons, asthma or other breathing problems where people can't physically wear a mask. And that's part of why the rest of us should in our work, because there's people who physically can't. That's different. But we want to make sure that as we're coming back to in-person work, that what we're doing is consistent and fair across the board. It's not just only volunteers have to do something and staff get a different level of treatment. That's very, star-bellied Sneetches. We don't want to we don't want to create that otherness or that sense of this person's health is of a different value than this other person's. But we want it to be consistent across the board in your team, and want it to be science-based. So even if um, the local health guidelines or local governments or state governments in your area are not requiring masks or hand sanitizing or hand washing or bibs or whatever the case may be, um, go above and beyond what might be occurring that is best practice, that scientists and medical doctors are saying is the case. Now, I'm in San Francisco. We had a very extreme thing occur, which wasn't pleasant, which was curfews. So we have mask requirements and things, but during the height of um, police violence against protesters here in San Francisco, we were all on like an 8 o'clock curfew. I don't know how people without yards walk their dogs. So there's also, things like that may still be occurring in your area that impact whether or not volunteers can move around or function normally. So again, back to that understanding, compassion, and grace. We're all in a really topsy-turvy situation right now, and it's good to have that clear communication and that community input and understand what are people going through, what are they trying to deal with in addition to their health and pandemic that's going to positively or negatively affect their ability to support our agency. The good news is there's a lot of, comfy middle class people with great computer skills who are bored out of their minds right now. So there's new potential online volunteers who can do anything for you from anywhere in the world. So expand from your local talent pool and use this opportunity to talk to people across the country, in the same time zone, not in the same time zone, if they're doing remote work for you, or even if they're remotely crafting um, masks, or in the case of a zoo, someone can remotely create biofacts or physical learning materials that you can then use in programs, or other education materials that you can craft. Painting rocks I don't know why painting rocks is such a big thing, but I feel like most of my career has been teaching volunteers about painting rocks and giving them out to kids as, as prizes. It's been a huge percentage of my programs is rock painting, and people love it. So there's so much that you can do online. It's not virtual because they're real people, but so much you can do remotely and online and still create three-dimensional physical objects or tasks, and find ways to do things in person that feel safe and comfortable for everybody. And it's really about the comfort, the convenience, and the connection, maintaining all of that for the volunteers you have, and being able to welcome people on board who are showing up literally on your doorstep if your brick and mortar office that's still open, or coming through online with what can I do, what can I do, what can I do? I'm a single person, I have no kids, I'm bored out of my mind, I'm furloughed, I need to do something. There's that talent pool to tap in as well.
That's great. Such great advice.
That was
So
a ramble. Woo, that was a good ramble. Okay.
now, a bunch of good stuff in there. Such good stuff. What now? I mean, we don't know what going back looks like, right? And it keeps getting changed, especially for those of us that live in southern and western states who are seeing a large increase in our
Mm-hmm.
cases.
Some spikes.
When you think about going back and the future of volunteer programs in this, whatever this new normal is that that we're trying to recreate right now, and dismantle and reconstruct,
Mm-hmm.
what would you recommend? Like, what would be your dream of the role of volunteer management and engaging volunteers in this new age when we do return and we have the opportunity to do better and be better? What would that look like to you?
Not like this. Not still panicked. Not still Indy running from a boulder. Not that. I'm hoping that this time, I just wanted to show off that slide. I'm so proud of that. that terrible cut and paste job. Anyway, no, but in all seriousness, that hopefully the idea of panic and bad short-term decisions is behind us. That's what I want to see happen. I want to, what I'm getting from friends and colleagues is that, and this is true of Jerome Tennille, that I just posted his interview last week on my channel. People who are furloughed are still getting calls every day on how to run their program. Friends in the Red Cross, friends in government agencies, friends in big nonprofits and small nonprofits, in CSR programs like Jerome, they're still getting called when they're not supposed to be working because nobody else knows how to do what we do. So I'm hoping that even when agencies have made bad, not very helpful or harmful initial decisions, that now they're seeing the value of their leaders of volunteers and bringing us to the decision-making table and listening to us and listening to the input of our volunteer team members saying, this is what didn't work for me. I'm sticking with you through thick and thin, but this really bothered me, and here are some ideas going forward. So the places that are listening now, even if they made mistakes at the beginning, they're coming back better. They're coming back with better plans because they're, again, community input and consistent science-based plans and phases. So I'm seeing a phased approach of who is absolutely essential to be in person, that those people come back in phase one, depending on your mission, and they come back with certain circumstances like the offices are cleaned more often by the contract cleaning crew, or they're cleaned with a certain protocol. Only a certain number of people are allowed in an office space at a time. They're on rotating days where some people come back a couple days a week and work, and some people work remotely still. And it's in, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 phases over the next several months or even a year. In some cases, I've seen a kind of a pop-up strategic plan of a year of phasing back, hoping that by the time everyone is phased back to in-person work in springish of 2021, that we have some contact tracing, or at least we know like who's already been sick, or we have some stronger and more consistent policies in place, or probably not a vaccine by then, but we have kind of like better structural ways and health system ways of dealing with infection rates in the pandemic than this kind of very reactive and panicked way that most cities and counties and states are reacting to it now. But it's really about phasing in. And hopefully, what we're also learning is not everybody has to be in the office all the time. We're definitely learning that with working, Zooming and working remotely and getting Zoomed out, is that old saying that most meetings could have been an email. Now we're realizing that, most meetings could have been a Zoom or an email or a phone call, and, we can work more efficiently remotely. Since I started working from home for myself a couple of years ago, I get way more done than when people are walking up to my desk randomly pestering me about stuff.
Mhm.
Even when,
Absolutely.
even when I was working remotely for full-time agency and working remotely 2 or 3 days a week because it was such a horrendous commute before I started to work completely for myself, it's like I get so much more done. Again, I don't have human children to look after, so that's a factor. But I think we're really learning a new and better way to work from this grand experiment and this great pause. And I hope that's part of what carries over in people phasing back into office work with our agencies. And how much do we really need to be at an event in person? Sometimes we do. And what precautions do we take? Is it indoors or outdoors? That's a risk factor. But really being clear in your communication and really intentional that this is why we're doing this way, and having everybody understand and have some buy-in because some of this is their idea and what they're comfortable with. That's important, not just telling people this is how it's going to be, but we've listened to you and we've heard you and what you're comfortable with, and we think this phased in approach is going to work really, really well. And that's something that's not just happening with my nonprofit or government clients or colleagues, but it's really happening with the tech companies here in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. They're the Apples and the Googles and the Pixars and the Genentechs are very, very careful about how they're phasing people physically back into offices, and they're very, very conservative about having people around each other. They're not taking any chances. And so that high value that they're putting onto their team members, nonprofits and government agencies with considerably less budget still need to make people feel just as valued and just as heard coming back into their usual roles, because nothing is going to be ever be the same as it was before, and that's good. This is the time to make these positive changes in how we work together, and how we have partnerships with other agencies and cooperate more than compete.
Definitely, definitely. Can you come off of your slide and then we
Yes.
can open it up? And
Stop
if
share.
you can come on video, then we would love to see your beautiful face. If you can't, it's fine. But we want to open it up to answer any questions that you have specific about your work, your organization. And I love what Diane put in the chat. Diane's like, sounds like the zoo is doing a great
I know,
job.
let's all go to Reed Park Zoo.
Can we hear more about that? So Carrie, if you're able to, I'm wondering if you could highlight some more stuff that you're doing at Reed Park Zoo to talk about some of your response. If you'd be willing to jump in for a bit.
Sure, I will try. My computer is now protesting 16 weeks of working at home, so having some issues, but I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, it seems counterintuitive because obviously our volunteers work on zoo grounds. They volunteer on zoo grounds. So how do we keep going when we don't have the zoo open? Still not open after 16 weeks. So I think mostly what we've done to keep them engaged is simply we've continued on. We held docent meetings every morning,
Mm-hmm.
and so we have continued doing that via Zoom. And we understand that a large part of volunteering is that social interaction with each
Yep.
other. So that has kept them connected to each other and to the zoo. I bombard them with links to other resources, virtual museum tours, other programs that zoos are doing so that they can stay engaged and keep professional development that way. We've done Zoom happy hours and brunches and scavenger hunts in their homes that have kept them going. We also do have some things they can do from home, so they can help run our webcams from a
Mm-hmm.
distance. So that has kept people doing that. And then, of course, we keep them updated with what's going on with our animals. That's what they desperately want to know. And so we keep them involved. Any questions they have, we get them to our animal care staff to answer and then get those answers out to them quickly. We've continued doing professional development via Zoom. So going through all of our animal related stations. And so people have been able to stay in touch that way. I think some of those, the brunches and the happy hours, we don't even do any zoo talk necessarily because we cover that a lot, but it gives them a chance to, talk about their anxieties over COVID and talk about these different things that they're all experiencing. So that's mostly what we've done. And we did a poll about how many people would be returning, what kind of precautions we had to have in place. And like 70% said they would return today if they could, kind of thing, knowing that we had precautions in place. And those who are uncertain, we have let everybody know that if it takes a year, if we have to have a vaccine before you feel comfortable returning, that's fine. Take as much time as you need. Minimum requirement hours are out the window. We're not keeping track of that anymore. So just participate how you feel comfortable. If your family is saying if you go back to the zoo you can't see your grandkids, stay home.
Yeah.
We don't want you to deal with that. So I think that's mostly is that we've just kept those modes of communication opening and then calling those folks who don't have computers or internet or that kind of thing. So
That's perfect, Carrie. That's 110% of what you should be doing, and I applaud the effort to just, again, a lot of it is that social time, and particularly working in the San Francisco Zoo years ago. It's social with each other, and it's social. People really care about individual animals. They have favorites or ones that they specialize in, and so that's important to that. To Annette's point, um, if someone is furloughed or laid off and they're still getting calls And the people I've talked to who are in that situation, it's mixed. I've encouraged them to keep track of their hours, even if they don't feel comfortable, but so that if they're on furlough, if they come back and say, actually, I've recorded these number of work hours that you had me do while I was furloughed, and then go to HR and make an official claim and put it through not in a hostile way, but put it through the legal system and keep that paper record. I think that's the safest thing to do, that still shows that like you needed me. And that also supports the argument, or supports your case, coming back and saying, you know, to your leadership team or your executive director, however that, or board president, however that's structured, like, see how much you still needed me in that break. See how important it is to keep this connection and this engagement with our program. See how much we're hurting because so many of our frontline ambassadors, advocates, people facing front-facing clients and the public aren't coming back because we didn't, you made this hasty decision that really broke that trust. So not, angry and accusing, but just laying out like, here's what worked and what didn't. And here's how much I've had to work on my furlough. And I would like to be, compensated with comp time or paid time for that. So really keep a paper record. Um, Jerome got another job. He's furloughed from his main company and he just got another job. He got another, because he's that guy that has to work, and he just got another job, and maybe his original company has him back from furlough and maybe he stays with this new job, but he just went for it. So that was his solution, which I thought was really cool. I think it's a lot harder to make the case, to Annette's point of, here's my freelance consulting rate. I think just keeping track of your hours, if you're fired, I mean, if you're fired, like, read between the lines, see you later, like, go do your next gig. But if you are furloughed, or have your hours severely cut and they're still trying to contact you outside of your new part-time or cut hours, just keep that paper record, keep copies of emails, log phone calls. Zoom meetings are recorded, if they're going that far. And that's my advice on that. Yeah, and it is, you're right, Annette, it's a test of organizational continuity. And good record keeping is going to serve you no matter what. So again, these are hopefully lessons that can be learned by leadership team, if they weren't doing it well from the get-go, as in Carrie's case, where they're doing it pretty well from the get-go.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Carrie, about your experience on those questions. Who else has a question? You can feel free to unmute yourself and jump in. Anything that you're seeing or experiencing that you want advice on? Want to pick Dana's brain? This is an amazing opportunity. You can type it into the chat. We'll give that awkward Zoom space for someone to have the courage to jump in.
Yeah. You go. No, you go. No, you. No, you. Oh, wait. What? You go. Okay. And again, the unmute and join the conversation, or put it into the chat.
I want to hear about what you're struggling with, what you need support with.
Or just, we're the shoulders to cry on too. Just, whether we can solve something or not. Vent it out. Everyone's just stunned.
I know.
To silence.
I have another question. So
okay, go for it.
All right. Jump in. Okay.
And then you can jump in the chat if they need to.
So one of the things that you and I have talked about is the need for not just collaboration within the sector, but just the sector has been totally disrupted. And one of the stories that Dana and I were talking about was there's a food bank in a large city, one of the largest in the US, and that food bank has more resources than they have ever had in the history of the food bank. They've been receiving a ton of donations from corporate individuals, groups, right? They have a ton of resources. So now they are going to make one of their dreams come true, which is they want to be a one-stop shop. So when someone comes for food, they also can, to Jan's work, they can talk about housing. They can talk about signing up for healthcare. They can get behavioral health support. They can learn about early childhood education. Like, it can be a place where the community member can come and get full comprehensive services. This is a very different model. It's going to send a ripple within that community, because they're kind of stepping into places where they haven't stepped before, where other agencies might be transitioning, they might be closing down, shutting down that serve those. So I've been encouraging all the folks that we talk to, like, don't just look at your organization, but look at your ecosystem, because you really do operate in an ecosystem within your community where people kind of thrive or diminish based on what's going on. And what Dana and I had talked about is, how could government, this is what I want you to talk about, how could government, philanthropy, and the nonprofit sector shift to working collaboratively to really serve the needs of community and sort of this mutual aid design and other things. So I would love to hear your thoughts about that.
Absolutely. And again, this great model that I was consulted on early on and said, yes, this is a good idea. And these are the agencies that Shanti and the city of San Francisco could also reach out to create this partnership is the main thing being that there's no need for foundations and philanthropists to sit on these giant $1 million, $1 billion endowments. If now is not the crisis that these endowments are there for as a safety net, my goodness, what else is next? An asteroid? Like what could possibly be more important to open the spigot and release the funds? And so the organizations and foundations that are recognizing that um, are really helping to expand this idea of partnership. And that's something that the National Alliance has been having a lot of conversations at high levels behind the scenes and encouraging Fidelity and other major funders who are usually pretty great at this to just open up the purse even more and let go of the idea of earmarks. So just as we're letting go of the idea of volunteers have to have a certain minimum number of hours, like let go. What I'm seeing that's successful is grants and foundations letting go of these weird, tight requirements in reporting and just learning to shift their culture to trust that nonprofit and governments, especially new partnerships, will spend the money where it needs to be spent. And it doesn't take so much staff time and resources just to do the reporting that it starts to not be worth it to have the grant. Um, so when that is working, that's who is thriving. When we see a collapse we've seen certain nonprofits that we thought were strong, again, medium or large or national or local or regional, completely close, completely close, or have their management panic so badly, or their board panic so badly that they're firing people up and down, left and right. So taking a deep breath and assessing that ecosystem of your agency and in the community. And also what I'm seeing is when local nonprofits that have those social service missions and government agencies recognize that spontaneous, informal, mutual aid has popped up to fill that niche in the ecosystem that they're not covering, if they can help that spontaneous, informal mutual aid doesn't have a 501(c)(3), if they can, instead of trying to crush that as a competitor, if they can come in with their resources and lift them up and bring them into the fold and the umbrella and still allow that grassroots autonomy of decision making, that's what's succeeding. That's who is thriving right now, is again new ways to cooperate with each other instead of compete. And not to take it personally that, oh, you know what? This school system, Lowell High School closed, and suddenly these kids don't get meals at school anymore. The neighbors are pulling together themselves on these 3 block radius in the Ingleside district and feeding these kids. What if we stepped in and helped them? What if we just gave them more food to distribute the way that they want to distribute? And maybe if they want to formally join our agency or our government program like Shanti and City of San Francisco, that's great. But how can we just support them kind of no strings attached? Like no judgment. Like, yes, they're following certain health things, or if someone is joining something to work with kids, okay, here's recommended background checks or certain, again, health and safety policies to balance. But letting go of this idea of tight control or micromanaging or lack of trust and this heavy, heavy oversight that has been the normal culture of philanthropy and been quite frankly, a huge barrier to partnerships, is people feeling like they're losing control of their territory. It's like, no, if a mission almost identical to yours or complementary to yours of mental and physical health services combined security, that's helping that entire tool need have my product and cheese because you already go to the food bank at Grace Cathedral across the street. Like that's madness, and that's not how most communities are handling it. We're seeing a lot of cooperation, a lot of opening of funding, and to Annette's thing, Oakland Public School Coliseum Prep, yeah, they just you see your neighbors in the community just start to do things that need to be done when the government and local agencies are scrambling about their own salaries or board severance or or whatever. Well, our board meeting isn't till next month. It's like, too bad, buddy. 24 hours public notice, Robert's Rules of Orders, make it happen. If you're not making it happen, I'm going to go with my neighbor across the street and I'm going to make it happen. And just understanding and recognizing that momentum and joining it and harnessing it and supporting it rather than trying to stop it because it's not official. A great thing that's happening in San Francisco is we are having a shift away from police responding to a lot of social and health, mental or physical health issues or drug addiction, and we're rapidly shifting to human services responding to events that previously were, 80 or 90% of the 911 police calls of someone in crisis, domestic crisis, child care crisis, um, health, mental health, physical health, drug addiction. So, that doesn't happen overnight, but that's part of this overall positive change that's come out of conflict and challenge that's been occurring, is like, oh, you're right. Maybe we can look at the ecosystem and match up the proper experts and services to people from a government standpoint and from a nonprofit cooperation and new partnership standpoint.
That's
Hopefully
awesome.
that answered that.
Yeah, and Kristen was saying your students volunteered as test patients
Hmm.
to help community health
Yeah, how
clinicians
fun
learn
is
how to deal.
that?
That's awesome.
And that's a brand new thing. So look at
Yeah.
what brand new things that never existed before are possible now. Not just volunteer roles, but or fun social things to do, but like this has opened up a whole new, wonderful bag of possibilities of new dimension of ways to be with each other. And let's, throw the unpleasantness of technology or limits aside, but let's start to lean into again, these new things where we don't have to go down to doctor's offices maybe as much. But that's great that the students did that. They probably had a ton of fun doing that.
So good. That's so good. And I thank all of you for being here. Any last questions that you might have? We have just a couple minutes left. You can put them in the chat. Dana, say a little bit how folks can find you. So if they think, oh gosh, I really want to ask this, but I didn't want to ask it on Zoom, or I want more information, where can they find you? Email, website,
They can
your
go
tips?
to, yeah, they can find me on the YouTubes for Priceless Advice for Leaders of Volunteers, and Dana Litwin consulting.com, and danalitwin.com also goes to that. Dana at danalitwin.com. And I'm going to do one quick screen share with
Oh, perfect.
my contact
Perfect.
card so people can see that really easily. Whee! There I am.
Oh, that's great.
I'm on
That's
the
great.
Tweeters, I'm on the LinkedIn's, I'm on the Facebooks. Subscribe to the YouTube channel for little bite-sized pieces of advice. And also, Karina, I'm looking at you too. I want people to send in your own Tuesday tips, or let's find a time to do a Priceless Advice interview with you. It's not just famous people. I want to just really talk to all of us out in the field doing this work, especially at this time, and get that out for everyone else to get your wisdom in the room as well. But yeah, find me a time.
Awesome.
I'm home all the time, so
I know,
I'm not
exactly.
on the road anymore. I'm not going to Tucson anymore.
You're
So
not jet setting
yeah, just hanging
around.
around in my own yard with my dog. So.
Exactly. We all got to get a little spickied up for today, ready to be on Zoom. If you want to keep up with us and the webinars that we're having.
I am wearing pants. I just want to prove that
Oh, nice.
I'm
Well
not
done.
I'm not just like in my jammies or something like
Go
that.
pants. Good
jeans
effort.
but
Good
pants. Yeah,
effort. I love
I'm
it. I love
fully
it.
dressed today.
If you want to see what other webinars we have coming up, check out www.pause, P-A-U-S-E, forchange.com. And on our webinar page, we have all the recordings of all of our past webinars. We feature what our next one is coming up. We have a new partnership in the works that I'll be able to discuss in a couple of weeks. So we are so excited to have you join us for future topics. And if there's stuff that you want to hear about that you could really help, you need help with within your organization, reach out, because we probably have a friend in the sector that's an expert that we can just have come on down and talk about and answer your questions. So we thank you so much. We will send this recording to you very soon. And please, please, please follow up with Dana if you have any questions or needs, and check in with us if you need any support. We're offering free sessions right now to any organization that just needs a thought partner, someone to lean on. So please reach out, and you'll have that in the email. So thank you all. Be safe, be healthy. Bye-bye. Take good care.
Yay. Bye. Thanks all. Talk to you soon.